Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, coming at you live to talk about episode 8 of Seth MacFarlane's The Orville, entitled Into the Fold. And let me get it out of the way right away and say that going into this episode, I was dreading the next hour. I don't really care for kids in shows like this. Star Trek, you think back to the episode Miri, and there are others that, kids took center stage in the episodes, and they were dreadful. I hated them, I loathed them, I despised them. I'll still watch them during a Star Trek marathon, that kind of thing. But, the kids started out this episode nauseatingly, and I was like, oh my god, the next hour is going to be filled with this. This is going to be what's happening nonstop. And I dreaded it. I didn't want to have to sit through the episode. And I have to say, I was pleasantly surprised at how meaningful and emotional and captivating, engrossing, tense the episode would prove to be. And by the end, I really liked the kids. I liked them. I liked their dynamic with Isaac. I liked their sort of, dynamic, the evolving dynamic with their mom, the doctor, Claire. And I found this episode to be surprisingly resounding. Not nearly as captivating maybe as last week's episode, but I really, really enjoyed this when everything was said and done by the end. And it called to mind, classic Star Trek episodes like from the original series, Galileo 7, where Spock and a few different crew members, I think McCoy and Scotty, as well as a couple more, crash down on a planet, and the Enterprise has to find them. But, it's a race against time because there's an admiral who has to be somewhere, I forget exactly why. And so they're fending off attacks from these giant sort of Neanderthal-type creatures, and it was something akin to that. It also actually recalled back to mind the Deep Space Nine episode, Ascent, or The Ascent, with Odo and Quark, having been sort of crashed on a planet, a very mountainous region on this planet. There was no other life and everything like that, and they had to climb a mountain to be able to send a beacon for help, and that's kind of sort of what's going on in this episode. So I was really reminded of those two sort of tropes, but then they flip it on its ear. They completely flip the table on you by making it, the Dr. Claire, her kids, and Isaac, and then splitting them up to boot. And I just, that was a captivating thing all told, And I was half worried that, by the end of this episode, either one of the kids or Claire herself were not going to make it out alive, It was actually worrisome because this is a new show. This isn't traditional, even though it's sort of aping on Star Trek, it's not Star Trek proper, so they really could do anything they wanted. And, you never know whether they're going to kill off a main character or not. Maybe I'm being naive, but I just thought anything could happen. And that's what was the most riveting aspect about this episode. I loved, again, the dynamic of splitting up the kids from the mother. They were nauseating and annoying as all hell at the start, as kids will do, as kids will be. And, but I really felt for them by the end, and there were two moments in the episode that, damn it to all hell, I got straight up misty-eyed. When finally, Claire is able to get into contact with them, she's sneaking around the guy who's holding her apartment and finds her communicator and gets back into contact with them, and her eldest says, I'm so sorry for, mistreating you and talking back to you and saying you suck and all this stuff. That characterization, the depth of that moment between them where she's like, it's okay. When you're angry, you say things you don't mean. It got me properly misty. It's probably because I lost my parents early on in life. That's part and parcel with it. But just the depth of the performances there and to see this kid realizing and appreciating. It's that old adage, you don't know what you got till it's gone. And there was every potential for losing their mom. And so he really appreciated in the moment how much she actually, in fact, means to him. And how much his little brother, and the little brother ends up being sickened by this, sort of biochemical agent that's in the water, whatever it is. And then toward the end, that moment where she's able to save her child, and she has that really tender moment with Isaac thanking him for being such a good caregiver, taking such good care of her kids. And it was intriguing. It was emotional. There were a couple of hilarious moments in that when, they asked him to tell him a bedtime story. And he's like, oh, one time a doctor and her 2 children, they were going on vacation and they crash landed. The mother might be dead, the end, And the kid's like, I hate that story. I laughed out loud. And, all the while this is going on, calling back over to the Orville, of course, they get word that Claire's shuttle never made it to their destination, so they're worried. They're going to try to track her down. They end up going through the anomaly, the spatial tear, whatever it is. And I actually did, I got to admit, it's a contemporary comedic reference. And that's the one thing I'm usually disparaging on. But I did laugh out loud at the glory hole reference. And that's probably because, I love playing Grand Theft Auto, going back to San Andreas. And I remember hearing on the radio in the game all the time, oh, glory hole, it's a theme park. And all this stuff. So that's what I immediately thought of. And when Bortus is like, we are entering the glory hole, and the captain, is like, no, never mind. It did get a laugh out of me. I also actually, did almost a spit take when they're like, damage report, after they go through this thing. And, Laura's like, oh, well, there's hull fractures, there's this, that, and the other thing, blah, 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 blah. And then Ensign Davis or whatever spilled soy sauce on his pants. And Mercer's like, he put that in the damage report? Damn it, I gotta get better people. I actually laughed out loud at that one too. So I like that they, one of my criticisms of the show is that contemporary humor. And when they dial it back and they put all of their focus into the characterization and the depth of character and the drama, the dramatic aspects, the performances are stellar. And that's really what I loved about this episode. It's what I loved about the last episode. It's what I love subsequently every single episode. Even the ones that I am not, that particularly fond of in the end, I still have, kudos to sing for the dramatic performances in each of the episodes. Whether it be the character dynamic going on between the captain and Kelly, whether it be, the sort of relationship drama that, Alar Katan is going through and constantly relating to us, whether it be the couple dynamic between Bortus and his significant other. All these things, the drama is exemplary in this series. And this was a nice dramatic twist. And again, flopping a sort of standard trope in Star Trek type series, on its ear by making this about a parent and her children and being, sort of broken apart from them and worried about them. And I also really loved, as a fan of Star Trek, all of the series, I really loved seeing the guest starring actor Brian Thompson, who I immediately, sort of the go-to thing for me is going back to Star Trek Enterprise. He played the Romulan Admiral Valdor, I believe was his name, in season 4 of Enterprise, I think. And he's a very recognizable face. He's been in tons of stuff. He's played Klingons. He's played other aliens in Star Trek. He's been in Star Trek many times. But you know him from elsewhere as well. And I just thought it was kind of ironic. It was kind of interesting that he's playing what kind of sort of could look like a classic Star Trek Klingon, in a sense, kind of a marriage between the classic series of Star Trek and the modern with the ridges on the head and everything like that. He has played a Klingon, as I've said. But I did think it was kind of ironically a little bit twisted, the fact that these Klingon-looking aliens, everyone's bitching, and then some 6 Ways to Sunday that the Klingons, air quotes, in Star Trek Discovery, oh, they ate the one captain. Do they eat people now and everything? And these characters, this alien species, they kind of look like Klingons. Oh, and they are cannibals. Let's see how many people complain about that. Are you going to give that a fair shake in the complaint department, when it's happening in the Orville, these Klingon-looking characters that are eating people now? Well, you didn't like it in Discovery, you better not like it here. I'm going to take it to task. But I mean, apart from that, all kidding aside, I really thoroughly enjoyed this episode, and it was a pleasant surprise for that. I did not expect to find it as riveting as I would inevitably by the end, and to be so captivated and wanting to see the reunification of mother and children. And whereas, like I said at the beginning, I was just dreading it. I was like, I don't want to sit through an hour of this. But they did it very cleverly. They did it, like the whole aspect of Isaac channeling Claire's voice to reprimand the kids and everything and get their attention and calm them down. At one point, they're fighting over the little handheld video game. He grabs it out of the kid's hand, tosses it, and shoots it. And he's like, nobody is ever speaking of that game again. You know? And like, it was hilarious. But at the same time, it was endearing. And by the end, to know that, especially the youngest son, you know, the rapport he grew with Isaac, he wants to see Isaac as he's healing in the sick bay and everything. Claire goes to thank him and says, you know, you're part of the family. And I just, oh man, I loved it. I loved the characterization. I loved that interpersonal interconnectivity between the characters. And, you know, whereas Isaac has kind of been, I don't want to say a throwaway character to me. I haven't really gravitated all that much toward him. They really, you know, sort of humanized him in a sense. I know he's not a human. I know he's an artificial life form, whatever like that. But they made him endearing to me for the first time in this episode with his interactivity going on between Claire's kids and with Claire subsequently by the end. Whereas I could have taken or left him. He was kind of a punchline, you know, putting the Mr. Potato Head stuff on his face in the one episode and his observations. It's like it was just a one-note thing. And now he's genuinely been endeared to me, much as Claire herself has, the doctor herself has. Because we haven't really gotten to know her. And in this episode, the performance of Penny Johnson, Gerald, as a worried mother dealing with a captor and everything like that, and you know, trying to get out of that scenario, trying to preserve her own life. And it all comes to a head. I mean, you know, this show is constantly going to be compared to Star Trek, you know, compared and contrasted to Star Trek. But that final sentiment when they come under the attack in the shuttle by all of the sort of mutated and sickened, you know, cannibals and everything like that. And the son says, you know, let me go. She pulls out an extra weapon. And he's like, let me go. You take care of my brother. You take care of your other child. And she's like, but set it to stun. Because life is still something that means something to us. It may not mean the same to these aliens, but it means something to us. And we're not going to kill needlessly, wastefully. And even that much further, you see, you know, she wants to concoct a sort of cure and hopes that they'll get permission via the Admiralty to go back and help this species. It was just, that is tried and true Star Trek, that value, you know, those morals. And where I have taken issue with the sort of moral paradigm as we've seen it explored in some previous episodes, this was the utmost that I was like, oh, hell yes. This is something I don't have to question. This is something I can automatically get behind because it's the best representation of what humanity ideally should be, how we should treat our brothers, you know. Unfortunately, it's not like that. It isn't the ideal. And it's just left to us, the individuals, to conduct ourselves as, you know, treat others as we would wish to be treated and such like that. And take ourselves to task for our despicable natures and our caregiving and all those things, all the aspects that make us who we are, the human condition. And that is something that the Orville has successfully, more times than not, put under the microscope and explored character-wise. And I love it. You know, I'm not going to say the show is better than Star Trek Discovery. I don't believe they are barring comparison. They are both entertaining for their own reasons, and I enjoy both of them for their own reasons. But this was stellar. It was a stellar episode as far as I'm concerned. I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below what you thought of episode 8 of the Orville. If you've seen it as well, Into the Fold. If you agree with me, if you disagree with me, anything goes in the comments below, as long as we have a great, respectable conversation. But yeah, I can't wait to see what's next in store for the crew of the Orville. This time out, once again, they knocked it out of the park as far as I'm concerned. And yeah, otherwise, it'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.